Readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
If these dangerous policies continue out of California, we might need to build a wall between California and Arizona as well.
In a certain sense, we're able to accomplish more in the minority than we were when we had the presidency or even were in the majority.
Well, I think one of the reasons they rushed it through, they didn't want their Republican colleagues to see just exactly what was in the bill.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
Given the stakes here, why shouldn't Facebook be regulated?
I actually am not sure we shouldn't be regulated. You know, I think in general technology is an increasingly important trend in the world, and I actually think the question is more, what is the right regulation rather than yes or no, should it be regulated?
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to this free-for-all Friday edition of A Focal Point on American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. Glad to have a congenial, convivial, and amiable audience along for the ride today. But we're going to start off here after we spend some time in the Word. We're going to start off talking about this omnibus bill that Donald Trump signed, President Trump signed, and we're going to kind of break that down for you.
Can we talk about spam instead?
Yeah, please. Let's eat some spam instead of talking about budgets. So, wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll have to break that down. So I understand that Debbie called me and said she was listening to Rush Limbaugh, and he was going off on Donald Trump. So that's the first time that, to my knowledge, that Rush has ever gone off on Donald Trump. He's been a pretty passionate defender of Trump against all his critics, but this time just put him over the edge, and we'll talk about why. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are using a schedule you can find at pray.afa.net, pray.afa.net. Encourage you to go there, bookmark it, open up first thing in the morning, read the passage of Scripture in your own copy of the Word, digital or hard copy, and then pray the prayer back to God. That's what I did this morning. That's what I do every morning first thing when you get up. I encourage you to get into the habit of doing that. Now, we're in Psalm 55 today. Now, I want to introduce what we're going to look at in the Scripture by saying if you've ever been betrayed by somebody close to you, then Psalm 55 is for you. You know, we can be betrayed by a husband or a wife who breaks the wedding vows they made before God and witnesses. We can be betrayed by a close friend. We can be betrayed by a good friend. We can be betrayed by somebody we would never imagine in the world could sell us out. You know, I've had this experience, as I'm sure you have. You know, if you were to ask me to make a list of the 500 people that would be the most likely to betray me, the people that actually did it would have been at the absolute bottom of the list. Now, Jesus knew what it was like to be betrayed. He said about Judas, "He who has eaten bread with me has lifted up his heel against me." In fact, Judas, if you look at the text carefully and understand the culture, Judas had one of the two seats of honor at the Last Supper. John had the other one. Judas was seated to his left and John to his right. So he knew what it was like to be betrayed. And so did David. Let me just read a couple of verses from Psalm 55, or you can get a picture of what David's experience was like. You look down in verses 12 through 14. Here's what David says. "It is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolent with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. We used to take sweet counsel together. Within God's house we walked in the throng." Then he says down in verses 20 and 21, "My companion stretched out his hand against his friends," meaning me. "His speech was smooth as butter, yet war was in his heart. I didn't understand what was in his heart until he betrayed me. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. Now, in our case, some of the people that betrayed us, Debbie and I, were our best friends. We've been over to their house all the time. They'd been over to our house all the time. We'd taken vacations together, and yet there was still a time when they sold us out. Now, David here shows us what to think about all this and how to deal with it. Now, the central thing that we learn from David's response is that the first thing that we need to do in the face of betrayal is to pray. The second thing that we are to do in the face of betrayal is to pray. And the third thing that we are to do in the face of betrayal is to pray. Now, there will be things that we need to do after we have prayed, but there is nothing we can do until we have prayed. Now, the first thing we do when we go to God in prayer is we need to be absolutely honest with God about how we're feeling and how this thing has hit us. You don't need to put on a happy face with God. You don't need to pretend. That's the one place where you can let it all hang out, and that's what we should do. And that's what David does here. Listen to what he says in chapter 55, starting in verse 2. I am restless in my complaint, and I moan because of the noise of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they drop trouble upon me, and in anger they bear a grudge against me. My heart is in anguish within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. So that's how honest David was about the feelings. You know what had happened to me? I remember the first time it happened to me, I felt like somebody had kicked me right in the gut. Just right in the solar plexus. All the air went out of my lungs. I just felt deflated, like I had been kicked by a horse right in the stomach. It truly felt, in my case, like my friend had lifted up his heel against me. Now he says in verses 6 through 8, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would wander far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. You know, you just want to get out of there. You want to go some way as far away from this mess as you possibly can get, and it's not always possible. And I remember after this happened the first time to us, Debbie and I were taking a long walk in the middle of one of these crises. I had just meditated and prayed on this psalm that morning, and so we were both talking about how sweet it would be if we just had wings like a dove and we could take off and just get out of Dodge. And that's the same thing that David wanted to do, but he couldn't because he was the king, and we couldn't either, but boy, we sure wanted to. So the first thing is be absolutely honest with God in prayer. Second thing, you can ask God to discipline those who have betrayed you. Remember, this prayer is just between you and God. You can ask him to do whatever you would like him to do to these people on your behalf, because he knows how to filter your prayer. He knows how to pick out the stuff in your prayer that he's actually willing to respond to, so you can trust him in that. So you can get all of that off your chest and trust God to sift through everything that you've asked him and identify those things that he is willing to do on your behalf. This is what David does. Destroy, O Lord, verse 9, divide their tongues, for I see violence and strife in the city. Then he says in verse 15, let death steal over them, let them go down to Sheol alive, for evil is in their dwelling place and in their heart. And then the last thing you do is you ask God to save you. You know, David says this in verse 1, give ear to my prayer, O God. Hide not yourself from my plea for mercy. Attend to me and answer me. Then he says down in verse 16, I call to God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon, I utter my complaint and moan. He hears my voice. He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage, for many are raged against me. You know, the first act of betrayal that I'm thinking of in my life led me to the church that I pastored for 12 years. The result of the betrayal was I wound up being able to start a church and be the senior pastor of that church for 12 years. The second act of betrayal led me to the American Family Association and to this job that I have right now, which is the favorite job I've ever had in my life. So pray to God, and he will save you. I am a living witness. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. Well, let's go to prayer and pray some of this back to God. In fact, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait till after the break because I want to take our time with this prayer. And to set the stage for the prayer, we'll come back to this after the break. And first thing we'll do is pray. But I want you to think about the fact maybe you're dealing with an act of betrayal, or maybe there's someone close to you that's dealing with an act of betrayal. And maybe this is an opportunity to pray for yourself, or by proxy to pray for someone you love. We'll be right back.
American Family Radio and Preborn are partnering to help save babies' lives throughout America.
Well, my name is Dan Steiner, and I'm the president of Preborn. Ultrasound truly is a game changer. When a mom comes into a pregnancy center under pressure to abort her child, perhaps the dad's gone, perhaps her mother is pressuring her. Most of the time in her heart she doesn't want to abort, but what she needs is something that will give her the strength to choose life against the pressures forcing her to consider abortion. That's the ultrasound. If she hears her baby's heartbeat and sees that baby on ultrasound, 80% of the time she'll choose life.
Be a compassionate answer to abortion and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com now. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. The American people are finally getting the truth on the Southern Poverty Law Center. Here's what Greg Gutfeld of The Five on the Fox News channel had to say. This poverty center has a $320 million endowment and chucks almost 20% of it into offshore accounts. We're talking Cayman Island stuff. They paid out $20 million in salaries in 2015, but provided just $61,000 in legal assistance. So the Southern Poverty Law Center appears to have no poverty and do virtually no law.
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio, talking here about a muscular response to being betrayed. And this is David's prayer to God when he had been sold out, when he had been betrayed. So let's just pray this together. Maybe you can pray this for yourself. Maybe you can pray this by proxy. You can stand in for somebody else. Stand by proxy for somebody else before the throne of God and pray for what they need in a time where they have been rocked and rattled by betrayal. So let's go. Lord God, I pray that you will listen to my prayer and not ignore my plea. Please hear me and answer me. It is not an enemy who insults me, or I could endure it. If a foe were raising himself against me, I could hide from him. But it is a companion, a close friend, someone with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship at the house of God. He attacks me and violates the covenant of friendship. His speech appears to be smooth as butter, yet war is in his heart. His words seem to be more soothing than oil, yet they are drawn swords. My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught at the voice of those who attack me. They bring suffering upon me and revile me in their anger. My heart is in anguish within me, and fear and trembling assail me. I wish I had the wings of a dove, that I might fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. I would hurry to my place of shelter, far from this tempest and storm. But I call to you, O God, and ask you to save me. Evening, morning, and noon, I cry out in my distress, and I ask you to hear my voice. Please ransom me unharmed from the battle waged against me, even though many oppose me. I cast my cares on you, O Lord, and I trust you to sustain me. I claim the promise of your word that you will never let the righteous fall. I trust in you. Lord, I also pray for my city and nation. I see violence and strife in our streets. Day and night the wicked prowl about. Malice and abuse are everywhere. Destructive forces are at work in this land. Threats and lies never leave its streets. I pray that you will confuse the wicked and confound their speech. bring down the wicked into the pit of corruption. May bloodthirsty and deceitful men not live out half their days, that our people may be secure and at peace. You teach us that unless you watch over a city, its watchmen stand guard in vain. So I ask you to watch over our city and nation and preserve peace and justice here. This I ask in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Okay, well, with that as prelude, let's turn our attention to what's going on in Washington, D.C. This is, I just grabbed the story off the top of the stack here. There's several stories I haven't had a chance to read yet, but this one intrigues me, and we'll kind of read through it together and get the substance of it here. But if you've ever been in an airport, you will know that all you see is CNN. In fact, this is true in more than 60 of America's busiest airport terminals. They're not tuned to Fox. They're not tuned to NBC. They're not tuned to anybody. They're tuned to CNN. So they have a ubiquitous presence in airports. You got a captive audience, people sitting there waiting for their plane to take off, and it's a captive audience. And people are starting to get a little bit restless about this. You know, CNN started off as straightforward news programming, but it's been a fixture, became a fixture at airports before you had MSNBC, which is heavily slanted to the left, and Fox News, which tilts to the right. They didn't even exist when CNN first started showing up in airports, but now people are wondering whether travelers ought to be subjected to CNN's increasingly ideological program everywhere. It's at gates, bars, food courts, baggage claims. They have on-screen graphics, cryons that gleefully mock President Trump, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we're going to talk to Dan Gainor next hour, but he told Fox News that CNN now has become more partisan than MSNBC since we have Trump in the White House. So we'll see what happens here. They've got a long-term contract with these airports, and so they're paying good money to get their message out. So long-term contracts typically give CNN the ability to curate content seen by travelers whether they like it or not. Now, it's an 8-year contract that they signed in 2016. For instance, this is one example. An 8-year contract they signed with Miami International Airport, maximum guarantee of $150,000 that may be adjusted annually as needed. So anyway, we'll talk to Dan Gainor about this clear bias in CNN and people starting to get restless that travelers in airports don't have any place to run and hide. They don't have the wings of a dove where they can fly off to another place and watch Fox News.
I can actually remember when CNN actually did news.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and they were early in the news channels.
They were the first cable news outfit out there. And they were the, cable news network. That's what CNN stood for, cable news network. Now it's just the counterfeit news network. All right, well, let's turn our attention to what Donald Trump did today. President Trump teased us yesterday by saying that he might veto this monstrosity. I call it an omnibust because it busts the budget. It breaks the budget. It's an omnibust. And Donald Trump was teasing us about how he was going to veto this thing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to break it to you, but Donald Trump has taken a deep dive into the swamp. Emerged covered with slime, but with his pen in his hand, having signed this monstrosity, this grotesque bill. Now, we've got some sound bites. President Trump had a press conference just shortly before we came on air and had my guys, Jeff and Rob, working overtime and accelerated pace to grab some sound bites from this. So let's grab Donald Trump. This is DT1, clip R3. This is the first of the 3 Donald Trump sound bites from the press conference in which he announces that he had already signed the bill, signed it in private. You know, normally when he signs a bill, I mean, this is a huge bill, $1.3 trillion. Normally has a big signing ceremony, all kinds of people in there to enjoy and celebrate and hand out ceremonial pins and stuff. But you could tell, somebody said to me, I was watching this with Rob Chambers who's on the staff here. He's with AFA Action, our vice president of AFA Action. And we were watching this together, and he said, first thing he said, he's going to sign this thing. Look at all the military guys there. Look at all the military guys. He's going to sign this thing. So Rob knew right away by the people that Trump had in the room that he was going to sign this bill, and he did it. And I want us to listen carefully to what Donald Trump says about why he did this, because this is a hint of things that are to come. Believe me, the left is paying even closer attention than you and I are paying to the very words that Donald Trump used. So let's go to clip R3, the first of 3 Donald Trump sound bites.
Therefore, as a matter of national security, I've signed this omnibus budget bill. There are a lot of things that I'm unhappy about in this bill. There are a lot of things that we shouldn't have had in this bill, but we were, in a sense, forced. If we want to build our military, we were forced to have. There are some things that we should have in the bill. But I say to Congress, I will never sign another bill like this again. I'm not going to do it again. Nobody read it. It's only hours old. Some people don't even know what it is. $1.3 trillion. It's the second largest ever. President Obama signed one that was actually larger, which I'm sure he wasn't too happy with either. But in this case, it became so big because we need to take care of our military. And because the Democrats, who don't believe in that, added things that they wanted in order to get their votes. We have to get rid of the filibuster rule. We have to get rid of the filibuster rule and go to 51 votes in the Senate if we're going to have really sustained, continued success. DACA recipients have been treated extremely badly by the Democrats. We wanted to include DACA. We wanted to have them in this bill. 800,000 people, and actually it could even be more. And we wanted to include DACA in this bill. The Democrats would not do it. They would not do it. To prevent the omnibus situation from ever happening again, I'm calling on Congress to give me a line item veto for all government spending bills, and the Senate must end. They must end the filibuster rule and get down to work. We have to get a lot of great legislation approved, and without the filibuster rule, it'll happen just like magic.
So that's Donald Trump, and we're going to see this. We're going to go into the next segment on this same topic, and we got a couple of sound bites of Donald Trump we're going to save for right after the break. But Donald Trump here has just given away the store. He's just given away the store. He has given the Democrats the key to the vault. He just told the Democrats how they can get whatever they want, how they can get as much as they want for whatever they want. President Trump said, you just throw enough money at the military and I will sign anything that you stick in front of my face.
And Brian, was it just coincidence that you opened the first segment with scripture about betrayal? I mean, because it seems like it fits right in.
Yeah.
A lot of people are feeling that today.
Well, you know, and I think a lot of people are, because you know this is not what Donald Trump promised us when he campaigned. You know, we elected him because he was going to build the wall over and over again. We're going to build the wall. That's what he said repeatedly. Build the wall. We're going to do it. There's going to be no amnesty. We're going to build the wall. So what do we get? We get a $1.3 trillion monstrosity of a bill, and we get no wall.
Oh, yeah, there's a wall.
Yeah.
It's just not in the United States.
It's not in the United States. You know, and what we get, you know, and I read this to you, from the bill itself, we got a bunch of funding for fences. That's what we got, funding for fencing. And then here's the other thing that we got, if I can find a story here in the stack. Here's who got funding for walls. You know that there is border security budgeting in this? There's a lot of money for walls. But you know where these walls are that have been funded in the omnibus? They are on border areas in Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, and Tunisia. Wow. The bill provides funding without any restrictions for the Secretary of Defense to, quote, enhance the border security of nations adjacent to conflict areas, and it specifies Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, and Tunisia. You can spend whatever you want out of this budget, as long as you stay within the budget, to build walls for these countries.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. The last 2 days, I shared with you the remarkable testimony of John Franklin Stevens before the United Nations concerning the contributions that Down syndrome individuals make to society. Mr. Stevens pointed out that Down syndrome people are a genetic gift to society in terms of medical research. Second, he pointed to a Harvard study showing that people with Down syndrome, their parents, their siblings, and people close to them are all happier than society at large. Third, Stevens points out that Down syndrome children are the canary in the eugenics coal mine. The controversy generated by genetic screening to identify unborn babies for abortion provides an opportunity to slow down, he says, and, quote, think about the ethics of deciding that certain humans do not get a chance at life, end quote. Singling out Down syndrome children for eradication is the harbinger of a slippery slope that is both very steep and fraught with danger. Who's next? Children diagnosed with serious birth defects? A girl with a genetic predisposition for breast cancer? A boy with a genetic predisposition for prostate cancer? What arbitrary genetic standard will be imposed by society and parents in the future? Some would call such restrictions progress. I call it barbaric, pagan, cruel, and wrong. John Franklin Stevens is an eloquent voice that I hope will at least stir the embers and awaken the echoes and a rekindling of the essential basic decency that formerly was an inextricable part of our nation's genetic code. May that rekindled conscience inspire us to rise to the defense of these helpless preborn human beings who are being discarded through abortion by those who callously deny their humanity and their right to life. Each time a Down syndrome baby is killed, everyone's humanity is diminished, and our civilization is decivilized just that much more. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net. afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Free for All Friday. We'll take your calls on this omnibus bill and want to know what you think about Donald Trump signing this thing. Find out if you're happy or unhappy. I'm not hearing anybody out there on our side defending what Donald Trump has done here. You know, when you say, I'm never going to sign another budget like this again, you know what that sounds to me like? Yeah. Sounds like the guy who says, this is the last beer I'm ever going to drink. I'm never going to drink another beer the rest of my life. All right, this is the last hit of cocaine I'm ever going to take. I'm never going to take a hit of cocaine again the rest of my life. And then, of course, they're back at it the next day. So I think Donald Trump has just given away the key to the vault here. He's told liberals, look, what matters to me is the military. You throw enough money at the military, you can pack anything you want in there. You can leave out anything you want, even the stuff that I find critically important, and I will sign that puppy for you. We got a couple of other sound bites that make the similar deal. Now, Donald Trump is talking about a couple of substantive things in here. He says, I got to have the line item veto, and we got to end that filibuster rule. But let me ask, why would they do that? Why in the world would they do that? Why would they want to get rid of the filibuster? Because they're getting everything they want with the filibuster in there. In fact, it helps them get what they want. It helps the Democrats get what they want because the Republicans can't stop them because they can't get 9 Democrats to agree with common sense legislation. And the Republicans secretly, I'll tell you, they like it too. Remember that letter that was sent? There were like 29, I think, or 26 Republican senators, maybe it's 24, I don't know, somewhere around half of the Republican senators signed a letter to Mitch China McConnell saying, Mitch McChina, saying that we want to keep the filibuster. We want to be required to get 9 Democrat votes to get anything through. We want to give the Democrats this tool to spike every decent piece of legislation that comes down the highway. Now, there's some weird psychology going on that would have Republicans. I mean, from a rational standpoint, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And so you got a lot of Republicans out there. I mean, they are perfectly happy with the filibuster because they secretly like these big spending bills, because then they can go home and they can tell their constituents how much money they threw at the opioid problem or threw at this problem or that problem, and how much they threw at the military and all that kind of stuff. So they're secretly happy with it. They'll moan and they'll complain about the size of the budget, but they secretly like it because they don't have to take hard votes this way. So, you ask yourself the question, President Trump, how in the world are you going to convince them to get rid of the filibuster when you just capitulated to it? You just gave in to it. I mean, you kind of whimpered and whined and moaned and complained, but you signed this monstrosity, and the reason it's a monstrosity is because of the filibuster thing. So anyway, at least he's calling for it. He was calling for it a good part of last year. We've been calling for it hardcore since last summer. I've been calling for it since I started this program. One of the things I could see right away was cobbing up every single thing in Washington, D.C. Now, he also wants a line item veto. I think that's a non-starter. I just do not think that a line item veto is constitutional. You can veto legislation, an entire piece of legislation, and you can explain why, but I don't think that Congress can give the president the authority to go through a piece of legislation and line out specific things he doesn't want. Now, he could do the same thing, essentially the same thing. He can already do it. You know, I mentioned this the other day. This is how a president could essentially invent a line item veto. Just veto a bill like this omnibus bill, veto it and say, okay, if you want this bill to be signed into law, then you have got to provide funding for a border wall. You're doing it for Tunisia. Can you believe it? I don't even know where Tunisia is. Jeff had to show me on a map where Tunisia even is, and we're paying money for them to protect their border with concrete walls. So, you know, we're building walls in Egypt and Jordan and Tunisia and who knows where else. So he said, look, if we're going to build walls in Tunisia, which President Trump said, I don't even know where it is, then you got to give me money to build walls along our southern border. I'm not going to sign this puppy. You can complain about it and moan about it all you want, but I ain't going to sign it unless you give me the money I need for the border security wall. We got prototypes down there. We know what works. We've got a plan. We know where this stuff is going to go. I'm not going to sign this bill until you authorize it's $1.3 trillion bill. You're going to tell me you can't find $25 billion out of $1.3 trillion to fund? You could build the entire wall for $25 billion. You're telling me you can't find that in a $1.3 trillion budget? So no, I'm not going to sign this thing unless you set aside $25 billion for the border security wall. You know, other stuff that's in there that Trump doesn't like, he easily could say, hey, you got to get rid of this. If you don't want to increase the size of this budget, fine. Then get rid of this and that and this and that. That makes up $25 billion. You get rid of that stuff. You know, all that stuff about shrimp running on treadmills. You get rid of that stuff, and I will sign your budget bill, but I ain't going to sign this one. That essentially would be a line item veto, but I think that is the only way that you are going to be able to do it. And I think Donald Trump, frankly, just kissed off any chance we'll ever have under his administration of getting rid of the filibuster. He hasn't given the Republicans or the Democrats any reason to get rid of the filibuster.
And I'm also reading something in the Washington Free Beacon that says that the Senate increased their total salaries of officers and employees by $12.6 million in this bill.
Yeah, they didn't give themselves a raise because they can't do that, but they gave their offices and their budget $12.5 million raise. So that's what they're out there doing. Again, I think there are limits about when you can actually raise the salaries of people in Congress. You can't do it if you're going to be a beneficiary. So I think the only time you can raise salaries of Congress is at the end of a legislative session when one Congress, maybe they sit for 2-year terms, into one Congress, like, November of whatever, like this year's the current Congress will end whenever this one's over, whenever the election takes place or somewhere in that neighborhood. And so between then and when the next Congress is sworn in, then you can do it. Then you can raise salaries because you won't necessarily be the beneficiary. You'll be raising salaries for people who are going to replace you or whatever. That's when you can do it. Can't do it when Congress is in session. But anyway, they can certainly give their budgets a raise. They can give their aides a raise and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's out there. So Again, Donald Trump taking a deep dive into the swamp. He's covered now with slime. He's covered now with slime. You see Donald Trump at the next press conference, you just picture him covered with swamp slime, because that's what he's done today. He took a deep dive to the bottom of the swamp and came up with that stuff hanging all over him. Let's grab the second Donald Trump clip, which is clip R4.
While we're very disappointed in the 1.3 trillion, nobody more disappointed than me because the number is so large, it'll start coming down. We had no choice but to fund our military because we have to have by far the strongest military in the world. And this will be by far the strongest military that we've ever had. So when you look at all of these pages, a lot of that is devoted, a lot, to the military.
So we have to sign this bill. Didn't have a choice. No choice. Well, President Trump, you had a choice. You always have choices. You know, people saying they had no choice is just an excuse in most cases. And he's saying we had to sign this to keep the military strong. Last soundbite is Donald Trump finishes his press conference, and then he walks out, and a reporter asks him a question on the way out.
We looked at a veto. I looked very seriously at the veto. I was thinking about doing the veto, but because of the incredible gains that we've been able to make for the military, that overrode any of our thinking.
Okay, so that's Donald Trump giving the Democrats the key to the vault. Just throw money at the military. I will sign anything that you want. Now let's grab clip number 1. This is Chuck Pelosi and Nancy Schumer. Let's Chuck Pelosi, Nancy Schumer.
Yeah. That's two peas in a pod.
Yeah, I've been getting on Nancy Pelosi for misspeaking. You know, and she's really.
Well, you said it so well. It sounded like you did it on purpose.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah, but you know, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, there is some health. She's got some kind of health problems. You know, you look at some of these clips where she has a hard time remembering her words. She stumbles over her words. She spaces out. You know, and I actually don't play those. I've made a point of not playing those because I think there's a health issue there, and I never want to make fun of somebody that's dealing with something like that. But anyway, this is Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and see if you hear any Republicans dancing on the floor over this thing outside of Chuck Pelosi and Nancy Schumer.
In a certain sense, we're able to accomplish more in the minority than we were when we had the presidency or even were in the majority.
Well, I think one of the reasons they rushed it through, they didn't want their Republican colleagues to see just exactly what was in the bill.
Well, you would know all about that, Ms. Pelosi. Where do you think they learned that technique? Learned it from the master. You know, so here you have Chuck Schumer saying, look, we got more done in this bill than when we were in the majority. Rob, I want you to play that first soundbite. We don't need the Chuck Pelosi part. We just need the Nancy Schumer part. The first, I'm just kidding here, playing with you guys. They think I'm serious, so they're not showing any reaction. Well, that guy's gone. We've lost him. But just listen to what Chuck Schumer says in the first half of this soundbite.
In a certain sense, we're able to accomplish more in the minority than we were when we had the presidency or even were in the majority.
Well, I think one of the reasons
he's laughing about it. He's chuckling about it. We're getting more done with this knothead Congress than we ever got when we were in control of everything. I mean, you realize what an indictment that is?
You literally could hear him giggle.
Yeah, he was chuckling about it.
Joyous.
This is hilarious, he thinks. So, man, I probably should have stayed away from this topic until I'd taken blood pressure medicine. I'm just kidding. In fact, my cholesterol came back just right dead center. Your cholesterol okay?
Great, yeah.
Okay. All right. Did you get stuck today?
We need to go to a break.
Okay. All right. Okay. But at any rate,
he takes the fifth.
Any rate, here is Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, they're laughing their heads off because they got more out of the Republicans and a Republican president than they ever did with Obama and a Congress that was controlled by the Democrats. So, ladies and gentlemen, if this doesn't produce some kind of You know, remember that passage in Judges 5 about the people of, I think it was Reuben? There were great searchings of heart. Man, there better be some of that going on in the Republican Party. But I'm afraid there may not be, and I don't know where that leaves us as ordinary Americans. Where we go from here, that's what we got to think about. Focal Point American Family Radio, Free for All Friday. We want to talk about the budget process, though. 888-589-8840.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Announcing 3 new episodes of Ryan DeFrades' Secret Agent. These animated half-hour episodes will entertain children.
That's right!
And teach lessons about joy, patience, and the dangers of selfishness. Ryan DeFrades is a secret agent with a whole lot to learn, and he insists on working alone until he's paired with a very unlikely partner.
Mommy!
Ryan DeFrades' Secret Agent, episodes 4, 5, and 6 from American Family Studios are available now at afastore.net.
AFR is one of the finest radio networks in Christendom, and I just have watched again at the quality of work that they put on the air, of the straight arrow kind of stuff that they support.
Thank you to AFR Radio. I started listening to you about 10 years ago. Before that, I had never called a congressman. I never called any of my senators. I had never been active. You guys have really inspired me to start picking up my phone and getting involved in the political process in our country.
God is using American Family Radio to inform, equip, and activate our listeners to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture. Please partner with us in this important effort during our 3-day share-a-thon, beginning Tuesday, April 17th.
Thank you guys for all you do to keep us informed. I'm using it to also inform my friends, and we just appreciate everything you do. Thank you, AFR.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back. Free for All Friday on Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Congenial, convivial, amiable as always. We'll take your calls. What your reaction is to this omnibus, Donald Trump signing this omnibus bill. How do you feel about it? So anyway, want to hear what you think. This is, I think, going to be a bridge too far for a number of, a number of conservatives. Now, I'm not saying I'm pitching Donald Trump. I want to be careful. I want to be clear here. I'm not jumping off the Trump train. I mean, the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, Trump is all we've got. Trump is all we've got. So I'm not jumping off the Trump train, because the only hope we have of getting anything legislatively or politically done that's positive is with Donald Trump. We cannot count on the Republicans in the House, cannot count on the Republicans in the Senate. So our sole hope of getting some decent political stuff done, public policy stuff done, rests with Donald Trump. So I am not off the Trump train. I'm disappointed with what he's done today. I think it is a huge mistake. I think he's going to have a lot of difficulty digging himself out of the hole that he just crawled into today, because of the advantages that he gave to his political opponents. But there's no way in the world, I want you to understand this, I am not jumping off the Trump train, because he is all we've got. We have no hope outside of President Trump. So he's the only guy we got to work with, the only chance we got of getting something decent done.
What disturbs me probably as much as anything is he has, and our Congress, our senators, have sold my grandchildren's future down the road. They have they've shoved this, and even great-grandchildren. It's gotten ridiculous what they're spending, that, it's like giving a kid free run of a candy store.
Yeah, or giving them a credit card with no limit on it and say, knock yourself out.
It hurts my heart. I wish they had to live by the same standards that I have to live and you have to live.
Yeah, and of course, Mitch McConnell doesn't have to worry about any of that, because China just made him millionaire many times over. So Mitch McConnell doesn't care what we're doing to our kids and grandkids, because his kids got a big $25 million contract with China. So his kids are set. for the future. And remember, the Republicans did this, and Donald Trump signed it. They lifted the debt limit. There's going to be no debt limit until 2019. So right now, Congress they can spend as much money as they want, and they'll send somebody down in the basement to just crank out the money. Just run the printing press, keep cranking out those greenbacks. There is no limit right now. They have a credit card with no limit. Republicans did it. Donald Trump signed it. No limit credit card for the Republicans in Congress. Doesn't go back. The limits on the credit card are not reinstated until 2019. So it's going. That means it's going to get worse before it gets
better. As you say, spending like drunken sailors.
Yeah, I was going to say spending like drunken Democrats, but now it's spending like drunken Republicans. Spending like drunken congressmen. So, okay, so anyway, that's not a pretty picture out there in budget land. Let's grab some calls. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. By the way, I'm very ecstatic about John Bolton as the National Security Advisor. I think it's a step up from H.R. McMaster. Bolton is really a bright guy. He's perfectly willing to use military force. Now, he's probably going to have to restrain that a little bit, and I hope Donald Trump will do that because Donald Trump is the commander-in-chief. He's the one that sets the military objectives. But John Bolton's a really bright guy. I think going to be a real asset and work well with Donald Trump. All right, let's go to Joel in Texas. Joel, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian, I agree with what you and Rob and Jeff have been saying. And two things. I think that the Republicans and the president are now culpable for the deaths of another 360,000 Americans that will be aborted in the next year. And I wish that, Trump has now lost all credibility with me. He could have easily said, I want every Republican to sign an affidavit saying they have read this bill. I don't care if they have to stay here another week. I'm going to veto this until they have signed an affidavit that they've read it, and then they send me. And like you said, the line down a veto is easy. He just says, this is what I need out of the budget before I'll sign it. So I agree with you, and I think he's going to have to rebuild his trust with Republicans. And I hope Christians will flood their representatives and senators with phone calls this next week concerning signing this omnibus bill. I'm thankful Louis Gohmert is my representative and Cruz is my senator.
Yeah, they were both strong on this. Cruz was a no vote on this thing. Gohmert was vocally a no vote on this thing. And Joel's right. There are going to be 360,000 plus abortions this year because Planned Parenthood is fully funded. This is another campaign promise that Donald Trump made. He could have said to the Democrats, well, he's got to take on the Republicans now on this too. You want me to sign this thing, defund Planned Parenthood? I promised the people of America that I would defund this thing. So you want me to sign your monstrosity? Then defund Planned Parenthood. That's $535 million. You're going to tell me you can't find $535 million in a $1.3 trillion budget? And the money wouldn't even not be spent. The money would just be shifted to community health centers, federally approved community health centers that don't do abortions. And there are lots of those all over the place. There are more of those by several orders of magnitude than there are Planned Parenthood clinics. So again, that didn't happen. And so once again, Planned Parenthood is funded 100%. All right, let's go to William in Georgia. William, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, bro, Brian, how you doing this afternoon, bro?
Good. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Two things really quick. The first thing is this right here. The first thing is this. One thing we have to consider is that I don't know what it's like to be a president. I don't know what type of different pressures that a president has to go through. And one of the things we have to take into consideration is that. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that in lieu of the reality of, how bad this bill was, he had to kind of weigh the objections of the different things that it was going to benefit as well as, the things that it wasn't going to benefit.
Yeah.
But the main thing I want us to get, the main thing, this is the second thing, and I'm going to get off and let you say what you're going to say. But the main thing is that we have to remember that God is still sovereign. And at the end of the day, he's not surprised that this bill was signed at all. And we have to take consideration that maybe this is actually a ploy by God allowing this to happen so that not only actually expose the swamp, but bring them to their own demise.
Mm-hmm. All right, William, listen, I appreciate that. And obviously it is a tough choice for Donald Trump. None of us know what it's like to have the kind of pressures weighing on you that the president has. I think on the other hand, one thing I'd say in response is that, well, the presidency is filled with tough choices, and that's just the nature of the job. You have to be prepared to take on these tough choices and make them. But I think your point, William, about remembering that God still has a purpose. He's not given up on the United States, hasn't given up on us, and there's something he wants to do with this to lead this nation in a good direction. He's got a plan in his mind about how this debacle could actually lead to something good for the American body politic, and that's what we have to look for. And again, God is still sovereign, but a lot of these issues, he says, okay, I'm still sovereign, but the way I'm going to deal with this is I am going to give you the responsibility to do something about it. I will counsel you. I will guide you. But solving this problem is going to be something I am looking at for you to do with my help. All right, good call, William. Thank you. Let's go to Terry in Indiana. Terry, welcome. What's on your mind?
Good day. Yes, what I on my mind is that before they passed the prohibition of alcohol, there were no murderous alcohol gangs. Before they passed the drug laws, there were no murderous drug gangs. After they passed the prohibition of alcohol, the murder and crime rate went up 70%. When they passed the drug laws, the murder and crime rate doubled, went up to 100%. They kept the prohibition of alcohol off for 13 years, proved to everyone, caused nothing but murder, crime, and corruption. So they repealed the law. The murder and the crime rate comes back down, breaks up all your, comes back down 70%, and breaks up all your murderous alcohol gangs.
So you're thinking maybe we just have a few too many laws in there for our own good when it comes to, say, like drugs. So would you be for legalization of drugs then?
For us to use. What?
I'm sorry, you'd be Terry, you'd be for legalization of all drugs, would you, Terry?
Yes. I don't know about cocaine, but Gary Johnson, the guy who ran for president, a libertarian, studied the issue. He said there'd be less deaths if heroin was legalized, and it would give less money to the gangsters selling it.
Mm-hmm. All right, Terry. Well, listen, I appreciate what you're saying, and I know there's libertarians make a very passionate argument for that by trying. It's kind of like telling a kid no. Tell a kid no, what's he going to do? He's going to want to go out and try to do the thing you told him not to do. And they think drug laws work like that. And I appreciate your call, Terry. I got a little bit of different slant on this than you do, and that comes from looking at the damage that drugs do, to teenagers and to our children. And I think we have to do something more than just wait till they hit bottom and then try to figure out how we're going to rescue them from the pit. I think we got to do what we can to kind of stop them from beginning into the kind of habit to begin with. All right, let's go to Lee in Bluefield, Virginia. Lee, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, I do not blame Donald Trump whatsoever. We talk about Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. I think the real problem, they're being their self. The real problem is Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. These guys say they're conservatives, but yet they don't do anything. If they really wanted to be conservative and back Donald Trump and lead this country down a conservative road, they would broke that filibuster rule. They don't want to break that rule. This gives them excuse as big spenders. Yeah. And I hate to say it, one of our forefathers said this country was made for a moral, religious people, and most of our Congress are neither moral nor religious. Most of the things that Donald Trump has done, he's done on his own with an ink pen. He has very little backing from Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan.
All right, Lee. Listen, I appreciate your call. Thank you for that, and you're exactly right. Mark, last call of the hour. According to my call screener, you're calling from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Love to know what's on your mind. Go ahead, Mark. What talk to me.
Yeah, I was listening to the radio station. I listen to y'all a lot, but today I'm disagreeing with you. I think what Trump did was the right thing. You don't know how long he would have had to wait if he vetoed this bill to take care of our military. And as he said that from the beginning, that our military is very important. And I agree with him. As a veteran, I agree 100% with that.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate it, Mark. And I know there are still people out there, and I'm glad to hear from you because I did want to hear from people that either supported or opposed what Donald Trump did. By the way, the producer weighed in. He said if you won't play Nancy Pelosi clips because of her misspeaks, because of her mental acuity, what's wrong with you?
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
News travels fast and it's constantly changing.
keep up on onenewsnow.com. It's a news site featuring the latest breaking stories from across the U.S. and around the world. OneNewsNow.com has well-researched articles from a conservative evangelical perspective. Get the full story when you visit OneNewsNow.com.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Steve Hugh. Protesters in California marched and held demonstrations over the shooting of an unarmed man. Tanya J. Powers has more.
Protesters marched from City Hall, then onto a nearby freeway before forming a human chain last night in Sacramento outside the Golden One Center where the Kings were playing the Atlanta Hawks. They were there to protest this. That's the audio from body cam video of Sunday's shooting of 22-year-old Stephen Clark. The unarmed black man was killed by police in his grandparents' backyard after there were reports he had been breaking windows in the neighborhood. Police say they feared he had a handgun. Investigators found only a cell phone. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
A border enforcement advocacy group says once again the Republican-controlled House punted on funding for more robust border security. Chad Groening has more.
45 House members and 22 senators sent a letter to Navy Secretary Richard Spencer and Admiral John Richardson opposing the application of atheist Jason Heap, who was backed by the Humanist Society, to be commissioned as a Navy chaplain. Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker, who spearheaded the effort to block the appointment, said, quote, "The appointment of an atheist to an undeniably religious position is fundamentally incompatible with atheism and secularism. This decision preserves the distinct religious role that our chaplains carry out." Retired Army Chaplain Phil Wright is executive director of the Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty, whose members endorse 2/3 of the 5,500 chaplains serving in the military.
We commend the Navy for its decision to not approve the humanist chaplain prospect because just by definition of his belief system, he is hostile or antagonistic to religion and could not meet the religious needs of the men and women serving in the military. So we were encouraged by the Navy's decision to not approve.
And Wright says they were also encouraged by Senator Wicker and Congressman Doug Lamborn and their colleagues, who applied pressure on the Navy through their letter of concern about the possible appointment.
In that letter, they reminded the Navy that the approval was inconsistent with the religion clauses of the First Amendment and the Department of Defense's own guidance.
Wright says they don't understand what a humanist chaplain would have to offer to service members who need spiritual guidance to deal with the effects of combat and other stresses of deployment. I'm Chad Groening.
Thanks to Congress, state officials will be able to target human traffickers within their borders.
The U.S. House and Senate have approved a measure that amends the Communications Decency Act to close a loophole that prevented authorities from dealing with online traffickers. Lisa Thompson of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation tells AFN progress was slow in gaining approval.
This bill had faced enormous opposition, but due to the hard work of advocates and survivors and some amazing legislators on the Hill, we were able to overcome that opposition to amend this law. And it's really the biggest achievement in our efforts to fight sex trafficking in close to 2 decades.
Until now, Thompson says the law, as written, made trafficking of women and children online as easy as ordering a pizza. Once signed by President Trump, this is what the measure will do.
It unties the hands of state attorneys generals to bring cases against these websites, like provide the superstructure that facilitates sex trafficking. Heretofore, the Department of Justice had sole jurisdiction to bring these cases, and unfortunately they just haven't been doing it for whatever reason.
That picture will change when the bill is signed into law, and organizations such as Backpage.com could face legal action by attorney generals, and perhaps that multi-million-dollar segment of their income will be no more. I'm Charlie Butts.
Sales of new homes have fallen for the 3rd month in a row. The Commerce Department says sales dipped 0.6% in February, coming in at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 618,000. That's down from 622,000 in January. Despite the monthly setbacks, new home sales are running 2.2% higher year to date. The median sales price of a new home climbed nearly 10% from a year ago to $326,800. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
If these dangerous policies continue out of California, we might need to build a wall between California and Arizona as well.
In a certain sense, we're able to accomplish more in the minority than we were when we had the presidency or even were in the majority.
Well, I think one of the reasons they rushed it through, they didn't want their Republican colleagues to see just exactly what was in the bill.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
Given the stakes here, why shouldn't Facebook be regulated?
I actually am not sure we shouldn't be regulated. I think in general technology is an increasingly important trend in the world, and I actually think the question is more, what is the right regulation rather than yes or no, should it be regulated?
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to the second hour of this free-for-all edition of Focal Point, free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point, American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. A couple of quick items, just loose items kind of off the top of the stack here. South Korea, they've got a problem with workaholism there. Did I say my name is Brian Fisher and this is Focal Point? Anyway.
You just did now.
Okay, if I didn't, I just did. So, South Korea's got a problem with workaholism, and so they are going to start turning off employee computers at 8 p.m. on Fridays to force them to leave work.
Huh. Really?
The government's just going to shut down everybody's work computers at 8 o'clock, so they'll have no option but to go home for the weekend. So apparently they got some of the longest work hours on the planet, so that's going to happen sometime. When I was back in the day,
Here it comes. Here it comes.
Well, back in the day, environmentalism back in the day was not littering.
Yeah.
It was keeping your environment clean. It's picking up after yourself, depositing litter in the proper receptacle, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm all for that.
Me too.
I'm big time into that kind of environmentalism. I want everybody just pitches in. You can keep your environment clean. It's just ridiculous. This big garbage piles up and all that. But nothing compared to what's going on in the Pacific Ocean. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. I don't know if you've heard about this. We've talked about it. It's been a while. It's just a floating garbage dump. It's got, plastic stuff in it. Let's see what else it's got in here. It's got trash in it from the entire Pacific Rim. 1.8 trillion pieces of junk is in this thing. It weighs 88,000 tons, which is the equivalent of 500 jumbo jets. And it's got all kinds of large plastic objects in it. And it turns out that thing now is bigger than the entire state of Texas. It's twice the size of the state of Texas.
Wow.
It covers 600,000 square miles of the Pacific Ocean. So that's the latest from the environmental movement. I don't know how you stop that. Just don't throw the plastic in the ocean to start with.
That must be it. I mean, people must be dumping trash directly into the ocean.
Yeah, and you think, guys going fishing and they just throw their cans or whatever, the little things that hold their six-packs together, just toss them overboard. Toss over plastic containers after they've had lunch.
So it's an island as big as Texas.
An island twice the size.
Twice as big.
But you got to realize that all the rivers run into the oceans, and anything in the rivers
all the debris
are going
that's
that way too.
Dumped in there by campers and picnickers and fishermen and all that kind of stuff. Democrats are really getting annoyed with Hillary Clinton. They keep wanting to put this woman in the rearview mirror, and she just keeps showing up. She's going to do a fundraiser in New York City at exactly the same time as the DNC chairman, Tom Perez, is trying to have a fundraiser for the Democratic Party. So she is really starting to get on the nerves of the Democrats. Now, let's see if I can clean up any more stuff on the omnibus spending bill. I've got the roll call numbers. That doesn't matter at this point. But the only interesting thing about the roll call votes is if Donald Trump had vetoed this thing, there were not enough votes to overturn his veto. So if Donald Trump had vetoed this thing, they could not overturn it. It passed with decisive majorities, but I did the math today, and there wasn't 2/3 in the Senate or in the House to overturn or overrule a veto. So if he'd vetoed this thing, it would have stuck. They wouldn't have been able to do it without making some kind of concessions with each other in order to get the numbers up to 2/3 to overturn the veto. So let's see what else is in there. This gets depressing after a while, but I just want to be sure you're educated on this. Let's skip that DACA deal thing. Good piece by Daniel Horowitz on Conservative Review about the ways in which the Republican Party sold us out. And his point is, and you look at it, we were talking about this on the news break, realistically, what is the difference between this bill and the bill that the Democrats would have produced? If you just took the Republicans out of the equation and let the Democrats pull together a bill, how would this bill that we got today, how's it going to be any different than what the Democrats would have done? So basically, it just kind of feeds into the idea that some people have, really, there's just one big giant party. There's one big giant political party in Washington, D.C. It's called the establishment. And most everybody in D.C. belongs to it. We're finding out who doesn't belong to the establishment by the people that voted no on this thing. They are the only people that legitimately can claim that they do not belong to the establishment. Now, here are some of the senators that do not belong to the establishment. They're not part of the swamp. Barrasso from Wyoming. Cory Booker, I'm not going to put him in that. He had his own reasons for voting against it. Thad Cochran from Mississippi, one of my senators. He's heavy into the swamp. Senator Cassidy from Louisiana. He was a no, doesn't belong to the swamp. Bob Corker did something very unexpected. He voted no on this omnibus, so he's a good guy on this one. Tom Cotton voted no. Mike Crapo from my home state of Idaho voted no. Ted Cruz voted no. Steve Daines from Montana voted no. Mike Enzi from Wyoming voted no. Joni Ernst from Iowa voted no. Jeff Flake from Arizona voted no because he wants to run against Trump in 2020, wants to tell everybody, I voted against that monstrosity. So that's his reasons for doing it. Let's see. Lindsey Graham voted yes, as you might expect. Chuck Grassley was a no. Let's see who else is in here. Ron Johnson, Wisconsin, he was a no. Let's see. The Kennedy from Louisiana, he was a no. Remember, he was the guy that said, if they let me, I'll vote against this thing. I'll vote against this thing twice. Yeah. Well, I checked. They only let him vote against it once. So Jim Langford from Oklahoma, good guy. He voted no. Mike Lee from Utah, he voted no. Let's see. Mitch McConnell, take a big wild guess how Mitch McChina voted on this thing. He was a big fat yay. And, of course, Rand Paul from Kentucky was a no. I'm really wishing that Rand Paul would have gummed this thing up. He was thinking about it. He really created a lot of ill will with the Republicans when he created so much difficulty for them a couple months ago. Because one senator, because you have to have unanimous consent for a lot of this stuff. If one senator doesn't give consent, then you got to go through this whole song and dance parliamentarian-wise, and Rand Paul decided not to do it this time. Marco Rubio, disappointingly, was a yes. The other home senator from my state of Idaho, James Risch, he voted no. Let's see. Here's Elizabeth Warren. She voted no, and that's probably because it didn't have enough money in it. Yeah. And then Roger Wicker, the other senator from Mississippi, he was a big yes vote. So a lot of swamp creatures voting for this thing. Don't have time to go through all the folks in the House that voted no on this thing because there's 167 of them. So anyway, to go back to what the executive producer told me at the end of the hour, remember, I made the point that I don't play clips of Nancy Pelosi having these brain glitches because I want to be kind to those that are dealing with some kind of disability. So the executive producer says, if you don't play Nancy Pelosi's clips, what does that mean for your listeners when you are confused and you misspeak? Guess I will let you draw your own conclusions about that. Back with Dan Gainor. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
Today is the 8th anniversary of the Unaffordable Care Act. I'd like to say the Republicans tried to repeal the entire law as they promised, but I can't. Every so-called repeal attempt was not a repeal. They would have left most of the law intact, and furthermore, they tried to make wage redistribution permanent. Even the mandate and penalty for going uninsured have not been repealed. The penalty has only been zeroed out starting next year. Meanwhile, leadership is trying to stabilize the Obamacare exchanges with billions of taxpayer dollars redistributed from American pockets to health plan coffers. Most lawmakers never plan to actually repeal the ACA. They just use the promise to get reelected.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Folks, I know what you think. I want to be able to get my money. I'm not giving my money to anybody. I'm not giving it to the church, not giving it to the ministry. I'm hoarding it. I'm keeping it. I'm going to build. And when it gets so big, I'll build another silo, and I'll build another silo after that. And I'm just going to keep growing it, because when I retire, I'm going to have more money and I know what to do with. But look, it's important that you consider permanent income. The key word is charitable gift annuity. You notice I don't say charitable annuity. I never leave the word gift out. It's a gift.
A knowledgeable AFA Foundation representative will gladly explain the nuances of charitable gift annuities and answer your questions. Find out about charitable gift annuities when you call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or by visiting afafoundation.net.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy and welcome back to Free for All Friday on American Family Radio. The program is Focal Point, and I am Brian Fisher, your congenial, convivial, and amiable and effervescent host, as always. Not going to let this omnibus bill get me down. We're going to stay positive. It's not the end of the world. We're going to see if we can redeem something out of this, and a lot of that's going to have to do with how we communicate with our legislators. Somebody who knows all about that stuff is our guest on our decision maker line, Dan Gainor, who's the Vice President for Business and Culture at the Media Research Center. You can go to newsbusters.org to get a peek at the work that they do. They do terrific work researching, following the media, and all that kind of stuff. Honored to have Dan as a regular guest here on Focal Point. Dan, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
It's a pleasure to be back. And somehow all that stuff we learned in Schoolhouse Rock doesn't quite seem to transfer into current day.
Yeah, maybe that's what we need to do, Dan. Maybe we need to cut a CD or DVD of Schoolhouse Rock and send a complimentary copy to every member of Congress. Maybe they could learn something, because they obviously seem to don't know much about the Constitution or anything else at this point.
Sad but true. Sad but true.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I want to look at some of the issues that you guys monitor there specifically at MRC, and some of the ones that have been in the news over the course of this past week. I spent a little bit of time on this with my listening audience earlier in the week. It's been something, as we follow this protest against the anthem at NFL football games. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Dan, Ed Reed, who is a safety for the San Francisco 49ers, he was attached at the hip with Colin Kaepernick in protesting the national anthem. He's a free agent. He can't get a bite. He can't get an NFL team, and he is a very, very good safety. He's a hard hitter. I'm disappointed he's getting away from the Niners, but maybe the Niners are letting him go because he was part of this protest. Kaepernick's out of football, can't buy interest from the NFL, and I'm looking at this story here by Matt Philbin Dan, about this poll that was done on viewers and what the entertainment viewing, how they're affected by politicization of both sports and entertainment. What did you learn from that?
Well, we asked McLaughlin and Associates to ask some questions. They're already doing some polling. We said, ask likely voters how they feel about politics in their entertainment, sports, Oscars, award shows, whatever. And 75% of the people agreed that they don't want to be bombarded with political content. Now, the demographics of our nation is not 75% conservatives or Republicans or anything like that. This is across the board, people being interested in this because they're tired of it. They turn on TV. They want to watch something to get away from the rigors of the day. And so if you drill down, it even gets worse for the people in Hollywood and sports media and stuff. Because 44% said they're less likely to watch sports and entertainment shows because they're too political. So you look at the Oscar numbers, and you saw how bad the Oscar numbers were, and you look at how ESPN's struggling, and they're heading toward a dark day for their business model, and that's the reason. So in the final analysis, 47% of the people who did not watch the Oscars this year said their reason was either because it's too political or because they knew some of the presenters and they knew they would have to hear the agenda.
Well, and there were a whole lot of people, Dan, that did not watch the Oscars this year. Their numbers have been plummeting virtually, on a decline over the last several years. And if I'm managing the Oscars program, I would certainly want to pay attention to this. But half of the people that didn't watch our program didn't watch it because it's too political. I would say, look, we got to cut out that political stuff. I don't know if they'll do it.
Well, see, that's the way normal, sane, rational people would think, but they're not. They're liberal. And their idea is anybody who thinks it's too political, well, they just haven't gotten the message yet. We haven't reached them, so we need to be more political. And that's what they do. They double, triple, quadruple down. So the same thing with the NFL. The NFL knows its core audience doesn't want the social justice garbage that they're trying to force on them. But they also know some of the players do, so they bow to the players and not the people who pay their salaries.
It was like last night. I wanted to watch Loyola Chicago. I've kind of followed them like a lot of people around the country. They're kind of the Cinderella team this year. And that's the last thing I wanted watching that game last night, Dan. I didn't want anybody breaking into that thing or one of the commentators talking about anything political, even if I agreed with them. I do not want to hear anything political when I want to watch sports or I don't want to be politicized when I'm watching a movie, some kind of entertainment program, a sports thing. I just want to, like you say, get away from all that stuff. Even if I agree with it, I don't like it.
Yeah, we all used to be able to watch the same kind of shows. We didn't have to agree with one of them. They were just sort of funny or entertaining or good dramas, and there wouldn't be the message shows. Now the message shows are every show. And you turn on a football game and you're getting lectured about guns or Me Too. And the particular irony is a lot of these people who are lecturing work for news organizations or work for media outlets or are part of Hollywood that have all had enormous problems. They've all had ethical problems and sexual assault problems and sex harass problems. And then they want to lecture all of us how to live.
How about morality?
They don't get it. Yeah, Hollywood lecturing us about morality is like Manson lecturing us about being law-abiding.
Well, speaking, Dan, of a kind of drift into politicization of news or entertainment, or whatever, I saw you quoted in a story this week on Fox News about CNN. They're in like 60% they're in 60 of the biggest airports in America. You can't get away from them. If you're in an airport, you're going to see CNN everywhere you are, everywhere you look. But the drift with CNN, that could create some problems for them.
Yes, CNN has gone from being a liberal network to really just off the deep end. And if you're going to an airport, I'm lucky I don't have to travel too much in my job, but if you're going through an airport, you're already enduring, your airline, like American Airlines, missing its flight and missing a destination. You're stuck there, and now you're having to be lectured to by Brian Stelter and Don Lemon, and it's all left. Now, I know they've got contracts, but the airports need to understand that a lot of people who are having to watch this is not a neutral outlet. CNN airport, their airport programming is left wing. We're sick of it.
Well, when you go into a barbershop, let's say, and they got TV on to CNN, you can ask them to switch it over to Fox, and most times they will. But you're in an airport, you don't have a choice about that. You are stuck with CNN. The volume's up, so you can't hide from it, and all that kind of stuff. Well, let's play just a little soundbite, Dan. I want to illustrate the point about how politicizing of entertainment has crept into even our comedies. This is an excerpt from a program called Blackish. Things were different then. And I just want to have you react to this. It's a comment from a guy by the name of Dre, who I think is the father in this story. Anyway, it has to do with a birthday party for a grandfather, and the one of the boys, teenage boys, doesn't want to celebrate it. Anyway, let's listen to how the past being politicized even today in our entertainment. Let's listen. Clip number.
So you're saying you're not on Pops? Are you not hearing the same stories that I'm hearing? Put yourself in his shoes. Think about it. Pops tried to escape the racism of the Deep South and fell into the racism of Deep South Central. Sam Yorty was mayor, Ronald Reagan was governor, and they ain't never seen a black man they didn't want to break in half.
Well, Dan, so there is this entertainment show, ABC, saying Ronald Reagan never saw a black man he didn't want to break in half. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, this is what the left does. They write the history, so it doesn't matter what's true or not. We're going to teach people that. So Ronald Reagan did wonderful things when he was president, when he was governor, and you look back on it, and now, of course, they're going to attack a guy who can't defend himself. There's very few people around. You figure the people who are voting this coming election, they weren't even born or barely born at 9/11. They have no concept of who Ronald Reagan was, so they're going to turn on TV and see this, and they're going to decide based on that.
One last question I've got for you. I'd like you to respond to this clip from Chris Matthews. He's a guy that can get going on a pretty good rant, and he does in this one. And he's talking about Donald Trump's decision to let H.R. McMaster go and replace him with John Bolton. And here is Chris Matthews. This is clip R1, getting busy with that whole thing.
I don't know whether this is wag the dog, is this to get away from Stormy Daniels and the whole rest of this, or what, but to bring in the biggest neocon in the world, the one who so many millions of voters voted against in 2016, who voted against stupid wars, and bring in the biggest hawk there's ever been, and put him as head of national security is awful. And I don't know anybody disagrees with that who thinks.
And Dan, the longer that clip went on, the more wound up Chris Matthews got.
Yeah, I love the last line. I don't know anybody who disagrees with that. And there's almost like there's verbal ellipses. Who thinks? In other words, basically anybody who disagrees with me doesn't think. He's the biggest hawk in history. And in fact, if you look, I love how media narratives populate through the news system. And that's the word they keep using, hawk. Oh, he's hawk. He's hawkish. He's a big hawk. He's extreme hawk. They're all trying to outdo themselves. It's like watching a nature program. Hawks are everywhere. And this is a guy who clearly is hugely popular in the conservative movement. You almost can't even tell from the news coverage that this is actually seen as a good thing by a huge chunk of the country.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing newsish about what Chris Matthews was saying there. That was just all kind of one unhinged rant. Dan, I want to play one last soundbite for you. Let's go back to that one about Chuck Schumer. Now, I just want to play just about 10 seconds of Chuck Schumer. I've got less than a minute here, Dan, so we'll play the clip, and I want you to respond to it. It has to do with the omnibus that Donald Trump signed today.
In a certain sense, we're able to accomplish more in the minority than we were when we had the presidency or even were in the majority.
Well,
all right, so there you go, Dan. He's saying we accomplished more in a minority than we ever did when we had control of everything, and he's laughing while he's saying it, talking about this omnibus. This reflects Democratic priorities better than anything we could have come up with.
Yeah, and that's the fault of the GOP that is running scared from both the press and voters. You know, they look at these midterm elections, they're all afraid they're going to lose their jobs. So, of course, what they do is tell their voters to go to heck. It makes no sense at all. It's completely irrational.
Yeah. All right, good to have you with us, Dan. As always, Dan Gainor, Vice President for Business and Culture at the Media Research Center. As always, very informative guest. Thanks for taking time to chat with us, Dan. I hope you have just an absolutely terrific weekend, and we hope to talk to you next week.
Thanks. Have a good time yourself.
Thanks you, Dan. God bless you. Dan Gainor from Media Research Center, back with more. Stay with us.
Did you ever sit down to watch TV with your family only to turn it off because of bad language? TV Guardian is technology that mutes foul language in real time while you're watching television. TV Guardian was born out of the desire to watch a movie with the family without exposing children or adults to coarse or foul language existing in most of today's entertainment. The closed caption feature within all programming is used to look ahead, detect the offensive words, and mute them. Using simple level filters and sub-filters, TV Guardian can be used to filter content for your family. Religious references in mainstream programming are often offensive, using God's name in cursing, so TV Guardian offers filtering for those as well. More information is available at tvguardian.com/dish. tvguardian.com/dish.
American Family Radio is grateful for the support of TV Guardian.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you're a pastor's wife like me, you probably know what it feels like to live in a fishbowl. You know, that feeling like everybody is watching your every move?
The annual AFA Pastor and Wife Fishbowl Retreat is 3 days and 2 nights of relaxation and building relationships. The retreat is hosted by Pastor Bert Harper of Exploring the Word and his wife Jan. Special guest speakers will include AFR morning personality J.J. Jasper and his wife Melanie. The AFA Fishbowl Retreat is set for October 9 through 11 at the Linden Valley Conference Center in Linden, Tennessee. Call 800-326-4543 extension 300 for registration and information. That's 800-326-4543 extension 300. Or visit repairingthefoundations.net. Registration is limited to the first 35 couples.
Get out of the fishbowl and into the AFA Pastor and Wife Fishbowl Retreat. We'll see you there.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Welcome back. Free for All Friday on Focal Point. We're going to go to the phones here in about 15 minutes, talk about anything that's been in the news over the course of this past week. Got a few more items of content I want to put in your hands as we kind of glide toward port here for the weekend. I got a bunch of Friday stories here. I like to save these up. They're just kind of a change of pace and not serious news, anything like that. But after how wound up we got today over this omnibus thing, need to, something to kind of lighten the mood. Here is a story out of yahoo.com from Harare. This is a place in Zimbabwe. And there was a hospital there. And the entrance to the hospital was blocked by a large crocodile.
Oh.
This crocodile just crawled up onto the main entrance of the hospital and just laid there. Anybody tried to come in to go into the hospital, he'd snap at him. There was nobody could get into that hospital.
Yeah.
So they finally came and had to kind of take care of him. Then I read another story. I couldn't find it this morning. I even did a Google search on it. But it was about if you got a Komodo dragon and he's kind of in a bad mood, you give him a back rub, and that settles him right down.
Oh, yeah.
Go get the guy that did the back rub on the Komodo dragon and bring him here and do the same thing to the crocodile.
You first.
Maybe he didn't live long enough to do it to a crocodile. Maybe that's the problem.
A sad day in American history. Bozo the Clown is dead.
What?
At 89. Yes,
Wow.
Bozo the Clown has died. He was 89.
I like Bozo.
This is a guy by the name of Frank Avrich, longtime Boston television personality. He played Bozo the Clown from 1959 to 1970. He became the first nationally syndicated Bozo the Clown. He had a heart of gold, manager Stuart Hirsch told Associated Press. He brought the Bozo the Clown character to life better than anyone else's portrayal of Bozo the Clown.
I used to watch him when I was little.
Yeah, I heard about him. I don't know if I ever, we were just so poor we didn't have television. I don't even know if I ever saw Bozo the Clown.
Yeah, you had to go to a friend's house to watch TV.
I had to watch cartoons and stuff. Anyway, breaking news from France. These are the people that they're just real poshish about their diet and their food and how fancy it is and all that. Hamburgers are now outselling their classic baguette sandwiches in France. And it all started when a guy that runs a 3-star Michelin restaurant, what's his name? He was the Michelin chef Yannick Aleno. He won the New York Times Award for the best burger in the world. This is about 10 years ago. And since then, burgers have been all the rage in France. And the sales of the jambon burger, which is a ham and butter baguette, have been surpassed by the sale of American-style hamburgers, up 9% last year. That's the latest from France.
Yeah. Once you have a good burger, there's no going back.
No going back.
You know what? I just read a story on what the number one fast food franchise is in the world.
Yeah.
I can guess what it might be, and I'll tell you what, it's not McDonald's.
Subway, isn't it?
Yeah. You're good.
That surprised me too. I wouldn't have even thought there'd be more Subways than McDonald's in America.
Yeah.
But apparently they got more outlets. One quick item. There are two NASA twins, both by the name of Kelly. One of them is Scott, and the other one is Mark. And one of them went into space. The other one hasn't. So they studied these guys as identical twins, and they specifically wanted to see what happened to their DNA after they spent time in space. So they came back, and there are these things called telomeres, T-E-L-O-M-E-R-E-S, telomeres. And there was a researcher at Colorado State University conducting this research. Telomeres protect or cap the ends of chromosomes. So we're in touch here with DNA stuff. And the telomeres decrease in length as a person ages. The older they get, the shorter these telomeres come that cap the ends of the chromosomes. They reported that Scott Kelly's telomeres, after a year in space, significantly increased in average length while he was in space. But then when he got back, his telomeres shortened in length within about 48 hours of landing and then stabilized to nearly pre-flight level. So apparently they're back. They weren't identical twins when he got back, but then they were identical twins again about 48 hours
That's
later.
amazing. It just proves how big our God is with creation.
That's kind of something, isn't it?
Wow.
Now, here's a warning to those of you that are hoarders, and you know who you are. So this is just kind of a PSA from the folks here at Focal Point. This is from the Telegraph in London. The remains of a missing 87-year-old hoarder have been found buried under clutter in her home.
Oh, man.
Neighbors had not seen her for 4 years. Now, the reason they came in and started looking is that her daughter collapsed on Monday, and they went into the home, and they found her under mounds of paper. So I don't know who called in that she was in trouble, but when they came looking for her, they had to dig around through the mounds of paper, and they got her to the hospital, and apparently took care of her, but it took them 4 days to find the remains of her mother in another part of the cottage. No idea how long she had been there.
That's just sad.
Yeah, that is a sad story. All right, well, let's turn to Martha McSally, clip number 2. Got a few sound bites here to round out the program.
Martha McSally is running for Senate in Arizona. She is going to be running against Jeff Flake, and they're going to be and taking on John McCain. Well, no, she'll be taking on John McCain, I think, not Jeff Flake. He's retiring. And Martha McSally is at a round table at the White House talking about sanctuary cities. And remember, by the way, this omnibus fully funds all of the sanctuary cities. So here is Martha McSally talking about what she thinks needs to happen.
Now, we don't have any sanctuary cities in Arizona, but we're right next door to California. And as we saw in the loss of Sergeant Mendoza, it's the policies of other states and other cities that are letting these criminals go that then impact the rest of us. This is clearly a federal government responsibility. There's a lot of things that happen around here the federal government overreaches, but in this case, this is clearly what the federal government should be doing. And for them to be thumbing their nose at law and order and protecting citizens is so dangerous and a travesty. As we look in Arizona, we often look into the dangers in the southern border. But if these dangerous policies continue out of California, we might need to build a wall between California and Arizona as well to keep these dangerous criminals out of our state.
All right, so she's suggesting if walls work, we need one between Arizona and California to keep MS-13 from spilling over the border into Arizona. You know, by the way, that's something that cannot happen because of the Constitution. The Constitution takes away in 1808, I mean, up until 1808, states could decide who migrated into their state and who didn't. So, for instance, the states were in control of whether they allowed slaves to come into their state, cross the state borders and come into their state. They controlled that until 1808. After 1808, the federal government said from now on, this is in the Constitution, we'll be in charge of the migration of persons. So it was no longer up to states to decide who could come in to their state and not. So now you can freely cross the borders of every state. There's no immigration stop you have to make. I remember there was a time when we were going into California, you'd have to stop for a fruit fly inspection. They would ask you if you had any fresh fruit in your car, and if you did, you had to cough it up. But they don't do that anymore. You get free. That's what liberty's all about. That's in the Declaration of Independence. That the freedom of liberty is one of our God-given rights. So they can't do anything to stop this now. So she says, well, we need a fence, but obviously we need a border wall, but obviously we cannot have it, prohibited by the Constitution. That's why we need a wall at the southern border so they can't come into our country, whether it's Arizona or California or anywhere else. You know, we followed the race in Alabama that had Roy Moore in it being challenged by people who were inventing these charges of sexual molestation against him. There was no foundation to them. Every one of them was clearly a false allegation. The stories of the accusers fell apart on closer examination, but it worked. You had Mitch McConnell jumping in on the side of those that were accusing Roy Moore. You had all of the Republican establishment. There was nobody that came to Roy Moore's defense in that, and he wound up losing by about 5 or 6 points to Doug Jones. Now, here is the first speech that Doug Jones delivered on the floor of the Senate. Now, remember, in that race in Alabama, if Mitch McConnell had thrown some resources into that Senate race, Roy Moore could easily have won that thing. If the Republicans had bothered to look at the testimonies of these accusers and see how thin and poorly founded, how many holes there were in their story, they could have come out with wholehearted support for Roy Moore. Resources, money, personnel, but they didn't. So they left Roy Moore out there to twist in the wind, and Doug Jones was the winner. Now this, Doug Jones, the Democrat that won, is who we got in place of Roy Moore.
We also need to get past the idea that more guns in society will make us all safer. The statistics and the data simply do not support that. We don't need guns in the hands of school teachers. Simply having more good guys with guns is not the solution. Americans just simply do not want to return to the days of the Wild West.
Now, remember in the campaign that Roy Moore led, there was one incident in particular where he was accused by somebody of being soft on the Second Amendment. He gets up on the platform and he pulls a six-shooter out of his holster to indicate that he's a big-time supporter of the Second Amendment. So instead of that, we've got a guy that does not want any armed personnel in schools at all.
Here's Jeff Zuckerberg, head of Facebook, huge problems with Facebook, compromising personal profiles, all that kind of stuff. So they're scrambling to save their lives. Here's what Jeff Zuckerberg suggests as a solution.
Given the stakes here, why shouldn't Facebook be regulated?
I actually am not sure we shouldn't be regulated. I think in general technology is an increasingly important trend in the world, and I actually think the question is more, what is the right regulation rather than yes or no, should it be regulated?
So this is amazing. This is a classic Democrat position. They always want more government, bigger government, more regulation. Conservatives want smaller government, fewer regulations, more freedom. That, in a nutshell, is the difference between conservatives and liberals, the size of the government that they prefer. Back with your calls, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840.
Hello, everyone. This is James Dobson inviting you to join us for our next edition of Family Talk. Our main purpose in this ministry is to put tools into your hands that will strengthen your marriage and help you raise your kids. We want to put an arm around your family in any way that we can. So join us next time for Family Talk, won't you?
Family Talk with Dr. James Dobson is heard weekday mornings at 9:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Hi, this is David Barton of Wall Builders Live inviting you to join me here on American Family Radio this weekend. We take the ideas of the Founding Fathers and apply those ideas to the major issues of the day. Our guests include those who are in the headlines as well as experts on issues facing this great nation. Along the way, you'll discover the role that faith has played in our nation's history as well as in dealing with the issues we face right now. Join us Saturday afternoon at 2 Central here on American Family Radio.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
Republicans once again betray their constituents. Hello, I'm Walker Wildman, host of Exposing Washington. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how President Trump and Republicans have once again betrayed the American people by passing a no-good, horrible spending bill. Tune in tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back. Free for All Friday. Number to call to join the conversation, 888-589-8840. Talk about anything that has been in the conversation or been in the news this week. Glad to have you talk about that, 888-589-8840. One other phone number I want to give you, so write it down. Grab a Post-it, write this phone number down, open up your phone, enter this number in your cell phone. This is the number that I'd like you to use if you have a listener story about how AFR has impacted your life. We've got our Spring Share-a-thon coming up, April 17 to 19. We want to hear from you. If AFR has had a positive impact on your life in some way, you've been more motivated to become involved in the culture war, you've been impacted in some extraordinary way, the kind of impact it's had on your life or the life of your family, how God has used it in your life, that's the kind of stuff we want to hear. We'd like to record your brief testimony, and we'll use it when we get to Share-a-thon. The number for you to call to leave your listener story. So think right now about maybe the impact that AFR, that Focal Point, or AFR in general, has had on your life. And call this number and share your story. If something jumps out at you as you think about AFR and your listening history, if something jumps out at you, something you're grateful for that you've experienced or has happened to you because of AFR, give us a call.
The number here is 877-876-8893. 877-876-8893. Love to hear from you. We'll use your story during our share-a-thon, leading up to and during our share-a-thon. All right, let's go to the phones, see what's on your mind on this Free for All Friday. Let's begin with Brian in Largo, Florida. Brian, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'd like to talk about this thing that they just passed this budget. By the way I'm looking at things and see things, I think Washington is just ready to implode. I mean, they're ready just to destroy themselves. So I don't think people realize that in our Constitution that we have the right to vote these yahoos out of there, and to start all over again. And I think the way things are going, if things aren't changed, that we should just fire everybody and just start all over again. Because I think, like right now, if Rocky and Bullwinkle ran for president and vice president, they'd be voted in. Because these yahoos ain't doing anything. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and there's a lot of that sentiment out there, Brian, and it'll blow kind of hot for a while because all of us get kind of worked up when we see this thing happen, and then everybody will kind of settle down after a little while. But I think there is going to be quite a bit of a sentiment, especially against Republicans. I think the Republicans here are the ones that are in the biggest trouble. Because remember, the Republicans asked us for their vote because they promised us they were going to get the budget under control, they were going to control the borders, and they were going to do something about the threat of Islam. This is what Donald Trump campaigned on. A lot of Republicans campaigned on the same issues. And now they're in office. They've been in office now for a little over a year, and they've done nothing to fulfill those major promises. They got a tax reform bill. That's great. We got a good Supreme Court justice out of the mix. But the only reason, ladies and gentlemen, we got those two things, the only reason we got Neil Gorsuch, and the only reason that we got tax reform is because it only took 51 votes to get Gorsuch confirmed. It only took 51 votes to get the tax reform bill passed because it was passed under the reconciliation procedure, which only required 51 votes. But it shows you what is possible if the Democrats got rid of that phony filibuster, the kind of things that could happen. Remember Chuck Schumer saying, look, this thing is better than we ever did in the minority. Well, why was this such a good day for Democrats? It was a good day for the Democrats because of the fake-a-buster. That's it. The only reason this was such a celebration day for the Democrats is because of the fake-a-buster. That thing has got to go. Until the Republicans get rid of that thing, there's no point in talking about anything else, because if that thing is still there, the Democrats are going to get every priority that they want worked into law, because that's the only way that Republicans are going to be able to pass anything. All right, let's go to Don in Oklahoma. Don, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, sir. I was just going to say that, I voted for Trump, and quite a little while I was pretty high on him, and now I'm very low on him. I wouldn't vote for him again. I don't care what. I'll vote for Chuck Schumer. They seem to be the only ones that can do anything. All he had to do is veto that thing, and he could have stopped the Planned Parenthood spending. He could have got the illegals out of here, built a wall, all that stuff. He didn't do nothing.
So this thing was a game changer for you. His failure or his decision, his refusal to veto this thing was a game changer for you, Don. You came into today. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to get a feel for where you're at. When you woke up this morning, you basically still were a fan of Donald Trump. But then when he bailed on this veto thing, that kind of switched the light off for you. Is that an exaggeration, or is that about where you're at?
That's exactly where I'm at. I spent 35 minutes waiting on the telephone to get through to the White House line to tell him, if you don't veto this bill, I will not vote for you next time. I don't care what. I mean, how much worse off would we been if Nancy Pelosi had got it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, Hillary.
Yeah, let me ask you
how much worse would we be?
Yeah, and Don, let me ask you this question. You have friends that are politically active, I'm sure, as most of us do, and maybe have a number of friends that voted for Donald Trump and liked him, got enthused about his Make America First campaign and all that. Do you have any idea how they are reacting to this decision on the part of the president not to veto this monstrosity?
I just don't think they'll vote for him again.
Wow.
I really don't. I mean, why would they?
Well, that's interesting, Don, because that's the thing we speculated. In fact, we played a soundbite from somebody the other day who was saying, look, it's the Republicans that are really at risk in the midterms. This is before this veto. She was saying, look, the Republicans are the ones that are at risk here because they're not getting anything done. You got Gorsuch and they got tax reform. What else have they got done? The answer is nothing. They've gotten bupkis done, and it's because of that filibuster, the fake-a-buster, but they control that. They could get rid of that this afternoon if they wanted to. And she said, look, this is a worrisome thing for the Republican Party in the fall election. They might have, Donald Trump, with this decision today might have just squandered the opportunity that the Republicans have to stay in control of the House and the Senate in November. Donald Trump's going to be there for 2 more years, but the control of the House could change, control of the Senate could change in November. So we'll have to see. Risky time to be a Republican. Marcus in Oklahoma, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, this is Marcus. It has to do with the fact that when we have bad leaders in charge, we produce bad bills. And I think one of the problems was when we had some evangelicals that actually split the vote between Ted Cruz and Trump. I think this is when everything began to go down the hill, because we really haven't passed anything that is really significant. Even when we went to the budget, it could have been a better budget if we would have went going down to the 51 vote, and we would have leadership in place. And this is what I believe would happen. It's just not what we need to be, and I don't even know if the Republicans are going to be able to recover from this.
Well, that's a good question, Marcus. I mean, I think it's a question that everybody is asking and everybody ought to be asking, and it's a legitimate question. Can the Republicans even recover from this? And it came down in the end, in the Republican primary, it came down in the end to Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. And there were a lot of enthusiasm for Donald Trump, and that included evangelical Christians who dismissed Ted Cruz and then threw their lot in with Donald Trump. And I'm not criticizing that. Everybody gets the right to vote for who they want. But there's clearly a difference in public policy outlook on the part of Ted Cruz and on the part of Donald Trump. Whether Ted Cruz could have even won the general election, of course, that's another question. And the chances are maybe he couldn't. Maybe only Donald Trump, with his personality and all that, could have won the general election from Hillary. But that being said, there's a world of difference between a Ted Cruz and what he would have done in the Oval Office and what Donald Trump has done. And maybe we're seeing some of those differences playing out in front of us. All right, let's go to Frank in Arizona. Frank in Arizona, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you much. Well, it is afternoon here in Arizona. So, anyway,
you guys aren't on daylight. You guys aren't on daylight savings time, so it's always afternoon out there in Arizona. So, anyway, go ahead.
It's a beautiful state.
Yeah. What's on your mind?
Yeah, we do have a little sliver that's on daylight savings time on the Navajo reservation, but the rest of us are on normal time.
Okay.
Anyway, I just wanted to clarify a little statement made by Martha McSally. She stated that we have no sanctuary cities in Arizona. Tucson, Arizona, in Pima County, is a sanctuary city.
I didn't know that.
We have, yes, they are. I was born in Tucson. I've lived here most of my life, and we do have one of the most corrupt city councils in the country, along with our Pima County Board of Supervisors. So, sometimes politicians don't think clearly and speak out of their backside, but we do have a sanctuary city in Arizona, and that is Tucson.
All right. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. In that case, a border wall with California wouldn't do you a whole lot of good. All right. I appreciate the call, Frank. We've seen that California is an entire sanctuary state. There's kind of a rebellion in California, by the way. There are a number of cities, Los Alamitos led the charge, that have gone against the sanctuary city policy for the state. They've said, we object to being a sanctuary city. We're not going to do it. We want to have the opportunity to cooperate with federal authorities. We don't like criminal aliens in our city, and so we're opting out of your California sanctuary law. Now, there's no reason, logically, why California wouldn't let them do it. If California thinks as a state they can exempt themselves from federal law why wouldn't the city think they could exempt themselves from state law? And Los Alamitos is not alone. There are a number of other cities want to do exactly the same thing. Well, that's it for this week. Do not forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap where God has placed you, and never forget we are fighting a winnable war.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio. Faith, family, freedom.